They're still talking.
Talking. I'm so happy to be able to talk. I was deaf for a number of years.
You're what?
Yeah, deaf.
Oh, how come?
Yeah. My hearing aids had decalibrated. I'm so happy. When I'm restored now for 2 days.
Good.
And it's
Big
another
difference, eh?
world. Sure puts me in greater appreciation for hearing.
Did you find that you had to readjust again or not? Because hearing aids take a bit to adjust to. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Did you have to do a story? Or were you prepared?
I just love being able to hear things when I first got mine. I could hear the clicker in my car for the first time. You know, that signal light clicker?
Oh, you were that guy.
Yeah.
The
Couldn't hear it.
forever left signal.
Yeah.
Okay.
The crinkle of the newspaper. It just didn't exist.
I know. Go out in the morning, Brenda and I go for a walk. In the mornings usually, in the summer for sure. And she'd say, listen to those birds. And I'd say, what birds? Then I put my hearing aids in, oh, birds.
I had a chickadee when I was living in 2017. There was a huge poplar in the front yard. And every spring this thing would go out and try and find a bait. And if there's anything, they do that whistle. And so it would wake me up at 3 in the morning. And it was that, so I wanted to be real and cried.
Did you use 20 gauge shot or what did you use?
They're small, they're hard to hit. And so a friend of mine went out and bought me a stuffed chickadee that was about 3 times the size of a regular chickadee. And you squeezed it, it made this noise. So there it was in the morning doing this whistle thing, and I went out and I squeezed this thing, and I cleared the whole tree. I don't know what my stuffed chickadee said, but it was rude. It was,
Isn't that interesting?
it was. Anyway, next time I tried that, this chickadee was looking for me. And he was, you could see he was mad, and he was kind of going out there, so I closed the door and ran away.
Yeah, the crinkle of the newspaper goes away. The first month I had just one hearing aid to start with. My left one. We went down to Palm Springs. And we had rented a home and had a pool, of course. Iowa Bunga. Oh, and then when I guess, oh my God, I've still got my hearing aid. Down to the bottom. My sister-in-law drove down, picked it up, into the kitchen, take the battery, take it all apart. Warm cloths and hair dryer. Still works. And that was 10 years ago?
It was water resistant.
No. It's not supposed to be. They say, they do not get that.
It's good. Solid.
The problem is when they're telling you that you don't have your hearing aid in.
I was looking on Netflix and then I checked on pay-per-view. I want to see Battle of Britain because I've seen highlights of it, the movie from the 60s. It looks good. but I can't seem to find it, so I might have to buy a copy of it or something. That's the only way I can think of seeing it
Is
nowadays.
it on Netflix?
It's not.
Have you, oh, is
I
it?
typed it, and a bunch of other obviously associated type content came up, but no, not that one. I'm quite surprised, actually.
You email me the night before the next Rotary meeting. I'll just get it for you.
You have it?
I have everything.
Oh, really?
I have access to the internet. So yeah.
Ah.
Everything is on.
Oh, here's a good one. So there's what was it, the movie? I can't remember which. Oh yeah, it was one of the superhero movies. The one with
There's only been one or two of those.
No, with
Yeah.
Perlman. He's
Hellboy?
Red Hellboy. Yeah. Hellboy. So I guess people would
I
download the
remember that
movie on
super
internet, and now they're getting a letter from the movie producers or whoever produced, because the movie didn't do well. So they say that's obviously how they're trying to maybe garner some revenue. So it was on the news yesterday. They says, if you get this letter, you better respond to it because it's a real legal document of sorts.
They want a payment?
Mm-hmm.
How much?
I don't know. I didn't catch that.
Good
I
luck.
would have never downloaded that.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah.
I have noticed that it's tax season, and we're all getting our,
Keyboard?
tax stamps on the.
Oh, I know.
Please press 1 to speak to an agent now. Okay.
Yeah.
The other one I'm getting every day, at about the same time. Is that my visa, it's a robocall, right, telling me that my visa has been compromised.
Yeah, I'm getting that one once in a while.
And I go, really? Nobody gives you a robocall on that.
No.
Before you are arrested, please press 1.
I got a brand new TD card, Visa, for work. I got it one day. I went down to a shopping drug mart downtown and bought something there, mail, mailing. And my next billing cycle, I looked and I had all these things. Except for the Shoppers Drug Mart, it's the only place I've ever gone. And it was compromised that day at Shoppers Drug Mart. Someone must have scanned it in my pocket. So anyway, I've talked to a bunch of people, so I went out and bought
The protectors.
RFID cards. It'll be
I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah, and that stops the scanning.
What's that cost?
$8.
Oh, worth the investment.
Yeah.
Most wallets have those in them now, I think, but
They
not
even
as
buy the
old.
wallets and
Some
the shield.
do, yeah.
A lot of the scams are in the store.
Mm-hmm.
It's not from somebody doing it. It's they're double swiping or they've laid in the little card.
I tell everybody it's a Shoppers Drug Mart.
Yeah, the last couple of scans we had on the credit card, the Visa code, I said, it was at the merchant kitchen in Winnipeg. We got a whole bunch of somebody working there. It actually came out in the second. And then same thing, we had another one in Langley. We went to a restaurant, had lunch. And the guy I remember after, he was the only guy working in there. It was like 1:30 in the afternoon after lunch crowd. And he took my card and did it just behind the bar, not in front of me. So he had his own scanner thing. And same thing, I went for gas like 2 hours later. That car's not working. What the heck? So now I'm in Vancouver. So I phoned Visa and go, sorry, we didn't have time to call you. But tell us where your charges end and this. And I go, I was in the restaurant line. And they go, we have issues there. We have to cut your card off. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, mine, I phoned the bank, TD, and I said, I was buying mocks. It's a woman, obviously woman purchases.
Oh, right, yep.
Yep. And just silly stuff. Nothing huge. But they were good about it.
Every time it happens with mine, it always seems to be flights.
Susie, what?
Flights.
Oh yeah.
Which to me doesn't make sense because you need to put in your name for flights and stuff. So, but it happened like 3 times in a row last year. Every month, there's flights every time. Then we stopped using the vendor we thought that it was from. Hasn't happened since.
Interesting.
Now we pay by check.
Huh.
Interesting.
Wow, that certainly narrows it down.
Yeah.
Well, and then it stopped happening. It could be just confirmation bias, but it kind of hasn't happened since.
It's pretty telling.
But it's a place we need to go, so now we just pay by check. It's usually family, though. I think it's just like this person's son or something.
Oh yeah.
Because it's normally family. When my credit card got stolen,
Oh, go again.
both times, it was a different card, but they were like, "Are you sure you want to initiate an investigation? Because 9 times out of 10 you know who it is, and 9 times out of 10 it's a family member. So once we initiate, we won't stop." And
But it's so mad. Then I got to cancel everything, everybody, and you know I got this new credit card with work one. So I set up with all my suppliers to charge this credit card.
you have to call them all.
Say Microsoft, and you got to call all of them back, and some of them you got to go 2 hours on the bloody telephone.
We kept getting the cable outside our work stolen, the copper cable. Like just 100 feet of copper cable. It was like once a month, 2 years ago. And it cost us so much money every time.
Did it?
It was, well, it didn't cost us money quite. It cost TELUS money.
Yeah.
And it cost us time, like
Downtime.
a week with no phones is not good.
Oh,
And I was literally just gonna put up a sign like, "Hey, just come over. I'll give you guys $50.
yeah.
And you guys go on your way, but don't steal my copper."
Yeah.
They're only even getting $1 for that wire.
Oh no, it was more than that.
Well, but how many feet do they have of that?
100 feet?
Yeah, 100 feet of copper wire. Even at the high price of copper, it still wasn't that much. You know, for what you're causing.
No, it was, and
It's
for
like
what
the guys
TELUS
that
paid.
smash your side window to get the dollar that's right? It's costing you hundreds and hundreds. Or the poor food bank with those catalytic converters.
Mustard seed lately.
Yeah, mustard seed. Yeah. Yeah, they caught some guys. And a guy in Calgary about a month ago, the jack fell on him and killed him.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah, right. Oh, yeah.
Gives you 10
Yep.
calories.
Of course, platinum beans. That's why they're so bloody expensive.
There were those bronze markers that were stolen
Oh, yeah.
in the park off the benches, and same within at the old base there. They stole like 19 bronze plaques. They got caught trying to get money for those.
The new plaques are pretty much worthless. Because they're not made out of anything that can be.
Yeah.
Ours are all bronze. And we're just waiting for it to happen. Somebody's going to do something. Sorry, we're not waiting, but
Couldn't be a surprise.
Perhaps that will happen.
You're anticipating it, yeah. Of course.
but we put up some cameras now and some of that stuff just for deterrence.
Where are you at?
Oh, sorry, it's Evergreen Funeral.
Oh, Evergreen. Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, is there a cake? Yeah,
Go grab. No, you want to grab the bundles. Bundles are so good.
I didn't have it.
So,
We're going to start our presentation in about 5 minutes. If you want to charge your glasses or if you need a little break before we start.
I need water.
You might need to figure out why
But I will
this
have to remember not to.
mic won't. Yeah, but there ain't nothing. There's no, there ain't nothing.
so the woman actually got up, and then my cousin went down to the front desk, the shift changed, and the night shift, the evening shift was no English.
Yeah.
But then eventually She got
Oh, not a fan of the food today.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You know what? I didn't eat everything. Like, I'm not judging you because it's too pillar for me at
Yeah.
lunchtime. But
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not a big pasta fan, and the turkey had too many vegetables mashed into it. What if I'm not a vegetarian? What am I supposed to do? Eat vegetables? Even accidentally, that's just wrong.
Vegetables are good, except for celery.
Yeah, celery is not a... Cooked celery is not... Well, any vegetable cooked is really not a good thing for me. 1920 by 1080. Okay.
I pretty much insist.
From rock hard to rotten.
But sometimes it goes
Because
well, and
this is
sometimes
not,
it doesn't.
this is not picky, right?
Yeah. One of my
No, that's why you do as much local as possible.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Of course, our local watermelon's not right here.
As we were saying, those small ones are actually, they're coming pretty good because they're ripening nice down south before they pack them away.
Yeah, I like the small ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my grandson is a big consumer of melon. Archie's a big consumer of all kinds of vegetables.
He can have mine.
Well, he's inherited. I did try not to prejudice him against celery, but he said he spit into it and he said, "This is crispy." Well, I didn't spit it out.
Well, he gave it an honest shot.
Yeah, but he eats everything else. Carrots and all kinds of other shit.
I'm fine with them as long as they're not cooked. Raw vegetables don't bug me, but cooked ones, I'm not a...
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, my son was in day home when he was young. I got a call saying he wouldn't be eating his vegetables. And I said, well, so we had this mother-son chat. And I said, what's your problem? And he said, she Because I started them all out with the pieces of vegetable in their trays, and they so
We fed our Argentinian exchange students
Oh, he wouldn't eat a vegetable to save his life.
celery sticks, uncooked celery sticks, right? He thought, you want me to eat that? He says, like he would never eat uncooked celery. From the downtown club. Has a condominium where we were in Mexico just recently, and anyway, she also good friend, we regularly together and stuff like that. But anyway, Deb went to China for a trip, and they had a tour guide, and so she said people were looking at him, staring at him. She says, "Everybody looking at me," and the tour guide said, "Oh, lady, because you're so ugly."
Oh.
See him as spiked hair there?
Oh,
Right? So,
that chocolate was good. Oh,
there are only two pieces. You and I got the only ones.
Good afternoon. Our guest speaker today is the Executive Director of the North Saskatchewan Watershed Alliance, NSWA. I'm not sure if it's easier to say, the acronym or the long name. Anyways, which is one of the 11 watershed planning and advisory councils appointed by the Alberta government, and she'll obviously explain that better. The NSWA is guided by the Provincial Water for Life strategy and partners with government agencies, municipalities, industry, agriculture, and non-governmental organizations. NSWA promotes watershed health and resiliency through studies, planning, and on-the-ground projects. Prior to the NSWA, our guest speaker was the environmental manager of the city of St. Albert, and that's where I first met. She's been a senior environmental coordinator for BC Hydro, and the first female land conservation and reclamation officer hired by Alberta Environment. She completed her Bachelor of Science at the University of Alberta and her Master of Science at York University. Her research focused on the reclamation and revegetation methods in sensitive Arctic landscapes. Please give a rotary welcome to Leah.
Well, thank you, John. I'm grateful to be here today.
And when I got kind of the invite, I thought this was perfect. My office is actually just across the river. I'm close to Capuano, so this is really convenient for me. Yeah, so as John said, I met him through working at the City of St. Albert, and his owner and guest, Roger Belly, also worked at the City of St. Albert. And what he doesn't tell you is that both these gentlemen were instrumental in some of the City of St. Albert's parks, particularly the Red Willow Park, which runs along the Sturgeon River. So when I worked at the City of St. Albert, I also worked on the Sturgeon River as one aspect of environment for the city. And in around 2006, we tried to start up a Sturgeon River Watershed group to really try to look at the health of the Sturgeon River and how we could improve it over time. And so when I left the City of St. Albert, I was approached by the North Saskatchewan Watershed Alliance because I had worked with them when I was working on the sturgeon. So it was a nice progression for me. So when I do come to presentations, I do try to find out a little bit about the audience, like who am I talking to. So I did look you guys up and see you on the check you out on the web, and looked up, what do Rotary members do and what do they believe. So and I'm reading this right out. You probably have it memorized by heart, but the members believe you have a shared responsibility to take action on our world's most persistent issues. And then there's a listing. You promote peace, which is wonderful, fight disease, provide clean water, sanitation, and hygiene, save mothers and children, support education, and grow local economies. So what a wonderful mandate to have. So I think probably my presentation probably aligns best with like the clean water, but I think it also really does, really grow local economies. A lot of people depend on our, not only the North Saskatchewan River, but the water bodies in the watershed. So I'm just going to share with you a little bit about the group, and maybe you can be inspired or think of other ways that you can, promote clean water or watershed health in the area. So how am I supposed to move this forward? Just
right arrow.
Okay. So firstly, I'm just going to tell you what I'm going to talk about. So really, what is the NSWA? And it is easier to say the acronym, John, than saying North Saskatchewan River Watershed Alliance. Where do we do our work? Oh, the mic died. Okay, I'll just keep going. Where does the NSWA do our work? Who is part of the North Saskatchewan Watershed Alliance? And how does the NSWA do our work? So as John kind of mentioned in the introduction, watershed alliances there's 11 across the province. And we were really groups that were working on watershed issues. But in 2003, the province came up with a provincial-wide strategy around water for life. And really, what was the impetus for this? Well, at the time, there was a major drought going on in Alberta. So there had been 3 or 4 years worth of drought. And at the same time, a small town in Ontario, Walkerton, had a drinking water disaster where their drinking water got contaminated and there was several deaths within their community. So it was Alberta felt like, you know what, we need to have a better strategy. And so they developed this strategy with input from Albertans, and really it has 3 key objectives. It is 1, safe, secure drinking water, healthy aquatic systems, and reliable water supplies for a sustainable economy. So as I mentioned, it was released in 2003. It had 3 overreaching goals. And what they heard from Albertans is that they really wanted to be involved in the watershed or water stewardship of the province. So what the province did was actually something very innovative, and I don't think they've really done it since, is what they've done is they've created a series of partnerships. Key partnerships including the government of Alberta, that is really the responsible and accountable person or organization. The Alberta Water Council, which is a provincial-wide body that is a non-profit, arm's length from the government, and it includes 23 sectors from across the province that meet on water issues. So some of the sectors are things like industry, agriculture, oil and gas, non-profit organizations, members at large. So it's quite a range, so it's really multi-stakeholder, so it's supposed to have everybody in it. And what they really do is they provide policy advice to the government, saying, there's a big issue on X, say groundwater, and we really need to look at it, and this is what we recommend we do. The other thing that they do is actually they were tasked with doing a review of the Water for Life strategy every 3 years and telling the government how it was doing. Very unusual and never repeated again. So actually it's a body that holds the government accountable for moving this strategy forward. Very unusual. And then the other partner was the Water Planning and Advisory Councils. Again, a very long name, and we're often called WPACs. So the North Saskatchewan Watershed Alliance is one of 11 WPACs in the province. And we are designated by the province. And we're arm's length, we're nonprofit. And our responsibility really is more about watershed planning and sharing of knowledge with our local stakeholders. And then lastly, but often most importantly, is our watershed stewardship groups. So those are local groups doing local activities. So for example, I was just mentioning to John, Lake Wabamun has a group of stewards that work together, and they're all volunteers, and they get together and they do research projects, they do education, they try to share information with all the people around the lake about healthy watersheds. So those are the 4 key partnerships. So how North Saskatchewan fits in, the North Saskatchewan Watershed Alliance is, we're a Watershed Planning Advisory Council. So this map actually shows you there's 11 of them across the province. So everywhere from usually major water systems, so the Peace, Athabasca, North Saskatchewan, Red Deer, Old Man, Bow, and some smaller groups, the Milk, Southeast area, Lesser Slave Lake, a few smaller areas. So again, we're a nonprofit organization, and we receive a bit of funding from the provincial government, and it seems that with every government, it usually gets a little bit less and a little bit less. So they provide us a little bit of operating funding, and then the rest we get from contributions. So NSWA gets a lot of our money from EPCOR. And why do we get money from EPCOR? EPCOR is responsible for drinking water for over 1.5 million people. So what we do is we work with them to make sure that the water upstream is kept nice, as clean as possible. So, and then we also receive contributions from municipalities. So there are 81 municipalities in our watershed. So where is the watershed? What area does it include? So this is it. So the city of Edmonton is right in the middle. It's hard to, I don't have a pointer, but it's right in the middle of the watershed. So the area is 57,000 kilometers, which is one of the bigger watersheds in the province. The Peace obviously is the biggest, but what we also have is we have 1.5 million people. So Peace is huge, but they have less than 200,000 people in it. North Saskatchewan also goes right from the Rocky Mountains. So the North Saskatchewan River actually starts at the Saskatchewan Glacier in Banff National Park, and then crosses through the foothills, goes by Rocky Mountain House, Drayton Valley, comes by Devon, Edmonton here, and then it carries on all the way to Saskatchewan border, and at Woodminster, where it crosses there. So in all length, it's about 640 kilometers, and it is divided up into smaller sub-watersheds. So there is 12 sub-watersheds within the North Saskatchewan. And so the Sturgeon River that I used to work on in the city of St. Albert is one sub-watershed. So there's 12 of them. And as I mentioned, there's over 81 municipalities. So that's counties, cities, towns, villages that are in this area. So who are we? This is a little bit about who we are. In a picture, always good to have faces. So the North Saskatchewan was actually established before the government had its Water for Life strategy. It was a nonprofit made in 2000. So this year is our 20th anniversary. So it's very exciting. We're doing some special events. And we were founded by a couple of different groups. So EPCOR actually was one of the first ones because they wanted to protect the source water for their customers. But the other organizations that were there were groups like Trouts Unlimited, Land Stewardship Center, a few other groups, and they just kind of got together and said, we should really start this group. And it was around 1997, I think, and then by 2000 they had enough momentum and they created a nonprofit society, and then we were actually formally designated as WPAC in 2005. So, I mean, we have, because we're a nonprofit, we have a board. I have an 18-member board. Again, multi-stakeholder. It should represent all the people across my watershed. So that includes provincial and federal governments. We have municipalities, counties and urbans. We have oil and gas, forestry. We have representatives from the industrial heartland. We have nonprofit groups. We have members at large. I'm trying to think of anything else. The Drainage Council, stewardship groups. So it's quite a large board. And we have a huge board, and we have a few little bit of staff. So there's actually 5 full-time staff. So besides myself, there's 4 employees. 2 of them are part-time. So really it's about 4.6 people doing all the work across this watershed. And what do we do? So what are our key responsibilities? So as I mentioned, really it's watershed planning. So what is that? So really it's a report on the health of the watershed. So what is the health like? And how is it changing over time? We also lead a lot of collaborative planning. And that's a nice way of saying we can't do it all by ourselves, so we have to work with groups to get work done. And then we also facilitate education and stewardship activities. So one thing I want to make clear to people is as much as we say North Saskatchewan Watershed Alliance, people often just think of the North Saskatchewan River. And that's great because it is the backbone of our watershed. But if you think of the definition of a watershed is a body of land. So that's what you have to remember. It's a body of land that drains into a central water body. So it is not as much about the water body, although it's an important part. It's about the land that drains into it. Because what we do on the land has a huge effect on the water bodies that it joins. So anybody who has lived at a lake, say like Waterman, knows, all the development around the lake, the agriculture or the industry, it has effects on your lake. It's kind of like that's a canary in a coal mine. Like you can see it right away. In a major river like North Saskatchewan, it might take longer for you to see these massive changes over time. So I'm a scientist, so I mean, when we're dealing with watershed, the first thing we have to do is do science. So in 2005, the Watershed Alliance actually did what's called the State of a Watershed Report. So that's really basically why you say, what information do we know? So I have 57,000 square kilometers. What do I know about it? Do we know what the flow rates are? Do we know what the weather has been over the last 100 years? What do we know about land use? How many roads are there? How many cattle are around? So you gather all that information and you have a state of the watershed report. And of course, because we're such a large basin, our report's about this big. And it took a long time to do. And I always tease the Alberta government because they have now a framework for watershed planning in Alberta. And basically, they would wait until NSWA did something and then they'd write a book and say this is what you're supposed to do. So, and we did our State of the Watershed in 2005, and in 2007 they came out with a guidebook on watershed planning. And so they really learned from our mistakes and then built it up. So there is a framework. So once you do a state of report, then the next thing you do is you say, okay, what areas do we not have any data on? Like we had very little data on fish populations or aquatic health. And that's things like, what are the plants that are growing in the river or the lake? What kind of small aquatic bugs do you have in your water? Because those are really good indicators of health. If you have a nice healthy bug population, it means you're doing good, it's clean. If you have very few bugs, and not a lot, it usually means your water's not great. So for 7 years, NSWA did studies, got background information, tried to fill in those data gaps, and then came out with what was called a watershed management plan, and that was in 2012, and that's that second report that's here. And again, Alberta Environment came out then with a handbook on watershed management planning in 2015, right after we finished ours. So
that really then provided the direction. And all the time we're doing this, we're working with the stakeholders that are in the watershed. So, I mean, it's one thing to be a scientist and look at your computer or look at data. But unless you talk with, the 1.5 million people that are out there, you won't know what the issues are. And they are very different in the Rocky Mountains versus the foothills versus Edmonton versus the prairies. Very different. So we gathered all that information together, and the Watershed Management Plan basically defined some big actions around 5 areas. So I talked about you need to do more on assessing what the water quantity is. Like, how many people are taking water out of the river or some of our tributaries? Do we have enough water? Water quality. So yeah, we know the main stem, but what about the tributaries? What about the lakes? We don't know anything about that. Gather more information. Aquatic health. That one's always a challenge. Very difficult and expensive to study. And then lastly, things like land use. What are the land use changes that are going on? What are the municipalities doing around all of this watershed? So since 2012 until now, 8 years, what have we been doing? We've been doing a lot of very specific studies, oftentimes with our partners. So in the Sturgeon watershed, there's actually a mini group, Sturgeon River Watershed Alliance, that we work with. In the Vermilion, there's a small group out there, Vermilion River Watershed Alliance, and in the headwaters as well. So, for example, these are just some of the studies that we have done recently. So there's one on the Strawberry Watershed Riparian Area. That's in the headwaters, so the Strawberry is a watershed. The middle one is Sturgeon River. It's on the aquatic health, which again is about this thick. And then we also do work on some lakes. We have over 1,000 lakes in our watershed. We can't do it on every single one. But sometimes our lake groups get some funding and we help them put together a report. Oftentimes, state of reports. What do we know about the lake? How deep is it? How much shoreline is there? What kind of fish are here? And so we've been doing those kind of reports. And those reports are really meant to provide information to the decision makers. So as much as I'm the North Saskatchewan Watershed Alliance, everything I do is voluntary. Everything that I have no regulatory power, I have no ability to say, City of Edmonton, you need to do this. I provide the information to them and to their decision makers, often elected officials, and then hope that they use it to make informed choices. One of the other things that I do is also we have the partnerships. So I just wanted to mention a couple that you guys might relate to. So one with EPCOR and the Alberta government is called the Watershed Project, which is a cool name. And we're doing a long-term water quality study of the North Saskatchewan River. So you're asking, well, wasn't there already studies going on? Well, yes, there was. So Alberta Environment does have 5 stations on the river that they have been collecting some really basic information on for probably 30, 40 years. But it's only 5 stations, and they only have enough money to go out once a month in the summer, and they only have enough money to do a small amount of parameters. So obviously it's a huge complex system. So EPCOR, bless its soul, donated $4 million to do this program. So $1 million for 4 years. And we've actually established 18 monitoring stations on not only the main stem, but the major tributaries, which is so very important. It's because the main stem itself, even if there's problems going on in it, they typically come from the tributaries. So a tributary, you guys might know, is like White Mud Creek or Mill Creek. There's a lot of materials that come down from those tributaries. Well, how much? Which tributaries are problems? Which one has a whole bunch of bacteria, or which ones have nutrients, or where are the inputs coming from? So this is a very exciting program, and I'd encourage you, if you wanted to go on our website, I actually just created a web page for it. And one of the cool things that we're doing for it is each of the stations now has a camera. And so you can click on the camera right now and you can see what that station and the river looks like today. And you can do that every day. And it's another way that we can bring people closer to the river. So this is a very exciting project. First time it's ever been done. It's going to be extremely useful. I really hope after the 4 years is that we can generate some positive vibes with the government, and they will think about funding at least a portion of it going forward. The Capital Region Water Quality Framework. So again, if you're from the Edmonton area, you know that Edmonton is big source of contaminants. So whether that's the storm water that comes from your neighborhood down the pipes into the river, to the wastewater treatment plant, which is just over there, I believe, Capital Region Wastewater Commission. So every time water goes down your sink, you take a shower, you flush your toilet, it goes to a treatment plant, but then water comes out into the river at a point. And also the industrial heartlands. So they have some point sources that come in, but not surprisingly, the biggest sources of contaminants are from us residents, from our wastewater plants and our stormwater. And then lastly, we also work with the University of Alberta on a lot of projects. They tend to be a little bit more scientific and esoteric. So interaction of groundwater and surface water in the North Saskatchewan River. And we're doing this with a professor who has figured out how to age water using radioactive isotopes. So he can tell if the water has come from groundwater, because it's very old, versus water that's just come down and melted as snow, which is very young. So this is just an example of some of our other partnerships. So as I mentioned, there's the Sturgeon River Watershed Alliance, Vermilion, Headwaters, and some lake groups. So who's the core in these groups? It's largely municipal led. Why municipalities? They are the decision makers when it comes to land. Your municipality decides how land is going to be used or changed. Is it going to be agriculture, a park, or residential, or industry? So it's really important that these groups understand their power and their role in this. And I also really believe, because our watershed is so huge, is that local issues are best dealt with local solutions. This landscape is so different, so varied, that there's no way we can have one solution for a whole watershed. And just to get down to some of the fun stuff, one of the other things we do is education and awareness. So again, having 4.5 people, we can do a little bit. But what we do, we have lots of fun. So we have educational forums twice a year. Actually, we just had ours last week, otherwise I would have given you an invite. It was just at the Millwoods Golf Course. It goes from 9 until 2. It's free, and typically we have 6 speakers that come on watershed issues. This one, the theme was on our success of our partners. So we had some really fun groups, like the stewardship group from Waterman came and talked about their work. We had each of the alliances talk, like the Sturgeon River group talked. We also had some of our other partners, the industry partners from the Heartland came and talked about what they're doing. And we often try to get Alberta Environment to come in and chat as well. So our next one's in October. If you're interested, you can always link onto our website and become a member to get our newsletter, which is another thing we do. Once a month, it's a very short newsletter. It's just got some fun things. If you're interested, you can click on the links, find out more what's going on. And then we also have completed a book. So can you hold it up, Roger? Ta-da! So this is our book all about the North Saskatchewan Watershed. It was published in 2016, and it's called Living in the Shed, which was a stakeholder suggestion for the title, Living in the Shed. And we have calendars for our 20th anniversary, but most of them are gone because it's March. So. But I do have a couple copies of the book that I'm going to be giving out to people who have been paying attention. Don't worry, it's not hard. Believe me. I give them away no matter what. Other things, education awareness as well. I told you about the newsletters. We have our website. I always like to kind of finish off and just say, if you want any more information, just go to our website. It's very easy, www.xwa, and it'll find you the rest. And then I just want to thank you for having me. But I also, oftentimes when I do these presentations, people always say, well, what can I do? What can I do? So I'd like to reiterate to people that our watersheds are really a reflection of us and how we treat our landscape and our water bodies per se. So it depends, we all depend on our watersheds, whether it's for drinking water, whether it's to get rid of our stormwater or our wastewater, or if we use it for recreation, or you have a link to the river from your history of your family. So we all have a responsibility to keep them healthy and resilient. So I have usually 3 tips for what you can do. Is 1, just keep informed. Keep informed. If you don't subscribe to our newsletter, subscribe to another newsletter about water that might keep you informed. The City of Edmonton has some great information, so does the City of St. Albert, on watersheds and what you can do to protect them. And then commit to individual action, and that really is just about what you do in your day-to-day lives. So that could be as simple as, planting a garden that doesn't need to be watered that often, or having a rain barrel, even better, save yourself some money. Or it can be about when you're walking on the trails, is to be respectful, stay on the trails, don't litter. If you have a dog, please pick up after your dog. A lot of the bacteria in our water bodies are from our cats. So, and I'm not talking about cats, it's about dogs. So, and then just support positive watershed management. So one, hopefully you'll remember who the North Saskatchewan Watershed Alliance is. Next time you talk with your, city councillor, or you talk to your MLA, whatever, say, hey, I heard about this organization. They're doing great work. Thanks for Water for Life strategy. The more times you mention that is the more times that people go, oh yeah, I forgot we did that. That's a really good thing. And so with that, I would be more than happy to answer any questions. And the hands are flying up. So this is a good sign. It's a good sign. So John.
Ross, you have your hand up first.
Thank you. So how is our water, Leah? How is the water in the North Saskatchewan River relative to whatever?
Relative to whatever. Good question. Again, I can only have 15 minutes because I've talked about a lot of things. So in the North Saskatchewan, like right here, like outside of our window, the water is fair to good. If you're above Devon, it's good to excellent. So when it does get to the city, there's a lot of significant contaminants that get in here. Again, it's from us, right? Our wastewater and our stormwater. So that's really important to know. But saying that, the water quality has really improved since the 50s. So in the 50s, it was really poor. Like it was poor right from the beginning of the city, and then all the way, it trickles into Saskatchewan. They're getting poor water because of us. But what we did was we built wastewater treatment plants, and we put on more treatment on them. So even just since the 80s, when our water treatment plants now have UV protection and tertiary treatment, has made a huge difference. So again, when you see your water bill and you say, oh my goodness, my water bill went up 50 cents this month, be grateful, because that means there's probably been an extra treatment level put on there to help clean the water so it goes back nice and clean. Oh, answer your question. Hi.
Sure, you had a question.
Yeah, I want to congratulate you on your book. I've when you first published it, I picked up several copies, so my whole family has it.
Okay.
And I would recommend it to anybody. It's a really good book. The also, are you monitoring any of the fish diseases as well, like whirling disease or any of that?
That's the province's responsibility. So
But they're collapsing
they're doing that. So one of the big threats to all water bodies in the province is invasive species. So or diseases that come across the border. So that's one thing I didn't mention, but everything from whirling disease, zebra mussels, flowering rush is a horrible plant that's taking over, and goldfish. You guys might have seen the story a couple of years ago with St. Albert when we killed 40,000 redfish. Yeah, so that was me. I did that. So invasive species are a huge concern.
So is this something that you would expect to tell the province that they should be monitoring again?
What they've done, and they've done a pretty good job, again, they're usually good when a crisis hits, right? So now they have this program where it's like, what's it called, drain, clean your boat. So now they have inspections at borders, and they'll often have, that's a great way, because a lot of times it's boat-to-boat transfer gets into water bodies. They just cut the spending on that. So they used to have it at every major endpoint coming into the province. Now I think they're cut it down to 2. So again, if that's something that you're concerned about, it's happening, or you've seen it happening, again, talk to your MLA and say, this is really important, Because Isle Lake, for example, in Lac St. Anne, it's got flowering rush in it, and over the last 3 years, it's gone from being like a little 700-meter area to almost a complete lake. And once it gets in, it kills everything that's native. And it clogs up the system, and it's moved down. It's been found in St. Albert. So once it gets in, it's really difficult to control.
Well, our native trout and the bull trout are in jeopardy.
Absolutely. Yeah, eastern slopes, I mean, yeah, definitely there's problems there.
Shirley had a question.
Quite a few years back, there was like this whole thing about beaver fever. What exactly is that, and is that still something that is a concern?
Beaver fever is really just, it's like a disease that you can get from water. So there's a lot of times, like if you do go to even a nice pure lake, like I have a cabin on Shuswap Lake in BC, you can get a lot of diseases from water. You can get beaver fever, you can get duck itch, you can get, all sorts of things. You can even just get, like bacteria will make you sick, right? E. coli will make you sick. So it's not a huge deal. The key thing is that get your drinking water from a secure source. And if you're camping, boil your water or sanitize it, and you should be fine. Again, there's some hot spots for those sort of things. So again, if you're going camping, just read the notices the park puts out, and you should be good to go. Don't worry too much.
You were first. Go ahead. Yeah, I'll go after you.
Do you play any role in monitoring flow levels?
Again, that's the province.
Okay.
So the province typically partners with Environment Canada for flow stations. And typically flow stations are on areas where there's wastewater release, so they know there's enough flow to dilute the waste that's coming out. Again, this government is just going to be cutting our flow stations probably by 30%. So we have to lobby for trying to at least keep the major ones so that we can, tell communities when it's okay to release their sewage mills. We're hoping.
So I just remember a couple of summers where we were worried we were going to flood Riverdale.
Oh yes, of course. Edmonton is, hindsight's 20/20, right? Should never built in Riverdale, Cloverdale, Rossdale, right? They're in the floodplain. They are in the floodplain. They will be flooded. They are within the 100-year flood. There's not much we can do about it now. I know the city has been trying to buy out properties as they've come up for sale, but people don't want to sell. They're just like, we'd rather take our chances. But I can guarantee you if they get flooded, the first person they're going to phone is the city of Edmonton saying, I want some money. So, don't buy in those neighborhoods.
They've changed the building requirements for a lot of the new buildings down there.
Yeah. And you have to have your window openings and door openings at a certain level. But still, you're going to get flooded. That's the history. You will be flooded.
What's the current forecast for the Athabasca Glacier to hit in the Continental Divide?
Oh, good question.
And you won't have a job anymore.
Yeah.
Because there will. It can be challenging.
Yeah, the glaciers and the Rockies are definitely receding.
Yeah.
I don't know the exact numbers, but I actually was born in Jasper. And my dad ran the glacier tours on the Athabasca Glacier. So I remember, when the glacier ran right down to Somewhat Lake.
That's right.
Yeah, so I've seen it recede in my lifetime. Good side of the story is that the river actually only gets less than 2% from the glaciers.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So a lot of our water that comes from here comes from the snowfall that's in the foothills. So, but climate change is still a really big deal. EPCOR is spending a lot of money doing climate change research to find out, are we going to have the same amount of water? Am I going to have enough water to supply the residents? So.
Cool.
Okay, no more questions?
I get to do something now.
Oh,
Okay.
sorry, yes, we have a.
So I have 2 of my books here, and the questions are not hard. So but I'd like to do a little bit of a quiz.
Okay, how do we decide? Because these are real energetic.
Okay, so you help me out here. So how many watershed and planning advisory councils are there in Alberta?
11.
John? Yeah. There you go.
Well, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And how many staff does NSWA have?
4.6.
4.6. 4.6.
Yeah.
I heard John.
It was Dave. Oh, Dave.
Dark, deep voice from that side.
So see, you remembered something. So awesome. So thank you guys so much for having me.
I like to learn something new every day, and I learned so much. I will never look at tap water the same. And the whirling disease. So I was doing something. I think we can all do something to help our water, and you gave us some good tools. So my grandson has a tank, a fish tank, I think one had whirling disease,
Oh.
as we're calling it, but there was another fish in there that was chasing it. So people are saying, just donate it in the toilet. I'm like I can't kill it, for one. But two, my thought was, I'm sending that fish down into no man's land to meet other fish in no man's land. And that's not a good thing to do, right? So I learned a lot. Thank you for taking time coming over to visit with us today. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Just on that note, Alberta Environment, to address goldfish and people flushing fish down their toilets, gives out fish coffins for kids. They're about this big, and they have their little goldfish they just open up, and then they can bury them. So I enjoyed fish coffins.
Fish coffin.
Just call them matchbox.
Sergeant at Arms.
Start out with the fun stuff.
Uh-oh.
Okay, so first of all, Stephen, you look so handsome and so well dressed that everybody else looks shabby.
That's right.
Wow.
So Stephen, you can pay a fine for being so well dressed.
Everyone else should pay.
So there's a little container on the table. Just throw your loony in there. And Sean, I hear you bought a fake knockoff ukulele on your trip to Vietnam.
No,
Doesn't even have a name
it's a
on it.
real ukulele.
So why is it a fake knockoff?
Who did
There's
you?
no label on it. You have no idea what it was made.
No, it was handcrafted by a craftsperson.
Sure it was.
Yep.
That's what he told you.
Well, you were traveling, so you can pay a fine.
Pay a fine.
Michael, your inaugural fine. You were late. Michael's a new member, so he has a big fine. So welcome to the club, Michael. And Ross, I think you did a poor imitation of Brenda. Brenda is way more considerate than that. So that'll cost you. And Kelly, you're supposed to be wearing a bowling shirt.
I am.
That's a Hawaiian shirt.
As close as I could get. I went to Valley Village and I couldn't find one.
Well,
You bought the bowling shirt, the only one they had.
but bowling shirts are not obligatory for Saturday, right?
That's correct.
Right.
Obligatory.
But it'll cost you, Kelly,
First cost change.
that you would go out and buy a shirt just to do a little blurb on
Well,
bowling.
my president asked me to do something.
Okay, so I want everybody to donate a happy buck for International Women's Day. Be thankful for the women that you have in your life.
Today.
For the women that have gone before us that are big role models.
Yeah.
Does anybody have a happy buck they want to add to that?
Yeah. Put it in there.
No? Okay,
Free
thank you.
It's actually Sunday.
It's a calendar.
No, 'cause that's a fine.
Polio Plus 50/50. Now, Peter, I received an email this week. Peter is in a hospital with pneumonia, so it's very serious if you're in hospital. And I know we've been trying to reach out to him. We haven't heard back yet. We tried to contact him in a couple of different ways. We haven't heard back yet. So we hear more, we will certainly let you know. I don't think it's super serious, but
Well, he's in isolation.
okay.
I got an email from him last night.
Okay.
But so he's kind of out of it a bit.
So think happy thoughts, people.
Yeah, for sure.
So we need somebody to volunteer to do the Polio Plus 50/50. Can someone come up from that table?
John.
So for our guests, what this is buy a ticket and you get a chance to pull a joker out of a deck of cards. And if you pull the joker, you then win the 50/50 pot. So you want some of you purchase a ticket. We're just double checking to make sure the joker is there.
There it is.
Laura's not here. Carl's not here.
Ouch.
A little bit, yeah.
All right.
So we're gonna.
Yeah.
Oh, here, we normally let our guests pull the tickets. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't blame me because they came there.
Oh, yeah.
Spent
Do the
like 20
results.
bucks 2 weeks in a row.
All right.
3 cards left.
But I'm an engineer, so I'm honest.
I know it's hard.
I know.
It's
It's harder than
Well,
it is.
how about that? Well, too bad I'm not Sergeant at Arms, huh? Okay, 329. Last three numbers, 329. Okay, Michael.
Good, Michael.
Okay. Calm down. Come on. Okay, pick one. Nice try.
It's in the middle, I saw it.
He didn't get the Joker.
That's really sad.
If he did, he better run ahead. I'll pick it right after this.
So upcoming events. So I'm wearing a bowling shirt that was purchased from the Value Village collection. Our bowling night is Saturday, March 14th. We have 15 of the 20 spots have been registered. It's on Eventbrite. I did send out a note if you're interested and you don't know anything about Eventbrite or how to use the internet, talk to me. I'll send you a link.
Is it 5 pin or 10 pin?
5. It's 5. Oh, you're hardcore.
I never get to use it.
Oh. Wait,
You can't use that giant ball.
it's that plastic bowl right after the
Bring it to luck.
There's still room for 5 more bowlers. If it's me, it's not a bowler. Wednesday, March 18th is not a meeting night. It is the Integrity Awards night. Thursday, March 19th is our meeting, and our own John Kolpeck is giving his classification talk.
All right.
So remember that. Do not show up here on Wednesday, March 18th. We will not be here.
Come on Thursday.
Come on Thursday.
Or you can stay overnight.
Friday, April 3rd, 12 noon, Dr. Stephen Van Buren giving us information on medical cannabis therapy. Interesting. You're coming back for that, right?
Can we throw that in?
All kinds of good information. Saturday, April 4th, 9 a.m. to noon is our club strategic planning session. Do we have a venue for that?
Not yet. I'm assuming it's going to be Emmy Lazert.
So we'll need to confirm the
Yep.
venue. But put it in your calendar for Saturday, April 4th. In the last couple of years for our planning session, it's gone really well. I believe it's Edith.
Edith and I will be here.
Yeah.
Edith and Sean are facilitating. It's really good. Lots of good information. Able to plan the year coming up. I'm sure there'll be even refreshments.
Refreshments will be provided.
There you go.
Yep.
Saturday, April 25th, the spring cleaning at our club's storage area at Automated Aquatics, followed by pizza and beer. Spring cleaning, doesn't that sound like fun?
Oh, there's a lot of dust out.
Yeah, don't worry, Daryl. No, we're not touching your stuff, Daryl.
Oh, it's all right.
Daryl's all worried here.
No, I got a collecting guy. He's taking it.
Saturday, May 9th, guess who's coming to dinner? Version
Yeah.
2. Who was at the last one? How much fun did you have?
So much fun.
Okay, so
Great.
it's a ton of fun. Really, it's a lot of fun. We'll send out information about that. You get to either host or go to someone's house, but you don't know who's coming to your house if you're a host, and you don't know who necessarily the other guests are if you're going. It's lots of fun. Really a great fellowship opportunity. Are there any other announcements people want to make? Other week here announcements? Or yes.
Just a quick note on the raffle tickets. We now have 14 members. We now have 740 of them out. So that's excellent. Thanks very much. And I have the tickets if anybody requires more. And keep bringing the money back in and get more tickets. That's all I can tell you. That's a raffle. It's for May 1st. Remember, we have till May 1st. So
you'll need to take us a little bit back.
Yeah, I'll need everything back probably a week before. But it's when we have a draw traveling meetings.
How, like a lot of people have been doing emails and texting. Yeah. I know I've done a lot of.
You and John and Donna are the kind of colliers. Ross is
right
there.
up there, I hear.
Ross, pick up the pace, please.
Okay.
It's really easy if you text people. I know you have a hard, sometimes it's hard to ask friends, but once you send one, then it's easier to send more. Just give it a shot.
Everybody's doing a great job.
Yeah, good job.
Facebook is good.
They just ping you back.
It's
Ping
so
me.
slick. It's just so slick.
Yeah, and you can e-transfer the money and send them a picture of the ticket, the whole thing.
Yeah, it's quick. When will the Mabel's tickets be available?
Eventbrite site is up and running. We've got a meeting this afternoon. I hope to be sending out a link to the entire club this afternoon. We'll be able to start purchasing tickets.
So that'll be great stuff. Any,
We're getting
Daryl, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, just once we get through this Integrity Awards, we'll start announcing our Business Awards, which usually takes place in somewhere in May. We've awarded, I think, 4 prior companies along pretty well 118th Avenue and that stuff. So if you know someone that's worthy or a company that's worthy, please submit their name. Highlands? Oh, that's a good one. But anyways, yeah, no, so as soon as the Integrity Awards is over, we'll start formulating the plan.
Any other announcements from people in terms of their areas, portfolios, club service, youth, anything? Say again?
What's a suggestion for Daryl?
Oh,
Okay.
John,
Okay.
John,
Oh, sorry, yes.
I have, the district is selling tickets in support of the district conference, helping to raise a little bit of money. If you're interested, Linda and I have tickets for this, and John does too, I think. Don't you, John?
No.
Oh, you don't?
You got mine.
Oh, I'll get yours. Thank you.
When is that conference, Ross?
Yes, in September.
Right.
And the tickets are for the stay in Greece or Costa Rica, or $3,000 towards Project Amigo Colima, Mexico. $20. Get yours quick.
Canadian.
Canadian. Yeah, that's a bunch of pesos times 14.
Okay. No other, okay. I'll bring our meeting to a close. Rotary toast. As we bring this meeting to a close and rejoin our families and communities we serve, let us consider all the things we can do. Is it the truth?
Fair to all concerned, will it build goodwill, better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Rotary.